Northwoods webinar on the subject of future-proofing your woodland. We've got a really good turnout, so that's great to see. Thank you for joining us this evening. We will just be lasting for 1 hour. We will try not to go on any longer than that, because I'm sure you've all got other things you want and need to be doing. My name is Martin Glynn. I'm one of the consortium providers in the Northwoods Partnership. We'll mention a little bit more about that in a minute. I'm going to be running this evening's webinar, and also we'll be hearing in a little while from Alison Field, who I will introduce, as I say, in a minute anyway. So in terms of the timings for this evening, just 5 or 10 minutes or so on some introductions and a little bit more information and background about Northwoods. Then, as I say, we will hear from Alison regarding the Forestry Horizon scan and a few sort of messages that there are for woodland owners and agents and consultants as well. I will then talk about the Northwoods Woodland Future Proofing Service, questions and answers, and then end by 7 o'clock, or pretty close on that anyway. Just in terms of the housekeeping, as I've said already, if you can please keep your microphones muted during presentations. The presentation will be recorded and put on our YouTube channel. And if you want to ask a question, please can you put it in the chat, and we'll deal with it afterwards once we've finished each presentation. So thank you for that. Just in terms of a little bit about Northwoods, I know a number of you will have already heard this, but there are quite a few people from around the country joining us this evening. So we'll just sort of talk a little bit about that. The Northwoods Innovation Programme is a platform to support and develop innovative approaches to woodland management, with the aim of developing new methods to help manage woodlands, in particular bringing woodlands into management which aren't currently managed or are undermanaged, which, as we know, is a particular problem in England in particular, but in the UK wider. It's funded by the Forestry Commission through the Woodlands into Management Forestry Innovation Fund. And what we're doing through the Northwoods Innovation Programme is 3 things: demonstrating and sharing innovative tools such as this, supporting for innovators, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, and then development of innovative tools. A lot of you, I'm sure, will have heard of things like My Forest and the My Forest Inventory. We've worked with partners there to develop some aspects of that. So it's a wide-ranging sort of programme of innovative events and tools anyway. So, and then also, and I guess what we've sort of used this for really is to re-establish a woodland initiative and forestry sector support programme in the North Eastern Yorkshire programme. Northwoods and Yorwoods did exist many years ago, haven't for a few years, but we're now pleased to be able to reintroduce that service using this support. As I say, it's managed by the Woods into Management Fund, and it's managed by and hosted by Reheat, which are a multidisciplinary biomass engineering and forestry consultancy business based in Northumberland, but operating across the UK, installing sort of biomass facilities, dealing with biomass supply chains, and offering various other services relating to forestry consultancy. Myself, I'm afraid to say that the 30+ years is now 40+ years, but that comes to all of us, I guess. RDI Associates, that some of you may know as Will Richardson, who is also a forestry consultant. And then we work with Silver Foundation, who I've already mentioned, and indeed Timber Auctions, who are Europe's leading online roundwood marketing service. And between us, we offer a whole programme of forestry support services, and sort of all sorts of supply chain development, project management and advice and these sorts of things, not just in the North Eastern Yorkshire, but across England and the wider UK as a whole. So if there's anything of interest to any of you, then please don't hesitate to have a word with us afterwards anyway. So what I'm going to do now is pass over to Alison Field to talk to us about the UK Forestry Horizon scan and what that might mean for UK forestry management over the next 50 years or so. I'm really pleased that we could get Alison here to speak to us this evening. Alison first of all, she was on the steering group for the Forestry Horizon scan. I'm sure she'll tell us more about that in a minute. but is also Vice President of the Royal Forestry Society, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with and perhaps members. She's also used to be a Director of Forestry Commission area in South East England, and is a Fellow of the Institute of Chartered Foresters. So we're very fortunate to have her here today. So I'm just going to change presentations. And allow right, hopefully you can now see Alison's presentation. So Alison, if you're there, would you like to
So Martin, thank you. And thank you for inviting me to talk to your audience this evening. I hope that some of what I might say might stimulate some discussion and debate, which was the whole idea of a horizon scan, and that there might be those who've already read the article that we published in the Quarterly Journal of Forestry last April. It's quite salient to realise that it's nearly 18 months now since this horizon scan took place, and something like 40 different individuals from right across the forestry sector came together to try and develop some thoughts about what the issues might be that would affect UK forest management in 50 years' time. It was led by Forestry England, thank you very much, and it was held at Cambridge University, and the host was somebody by the name of Bill Sutherland. Bill had used this sort of approach to try and identify lesser known issues that affected the environmental sector, and it's been quite successful there. So from the 40 experts, we probably reached about 7,000 different contributors to this exercise. And I do want to stress that what we did is we were looking for the issues that other people hadn't already thought about. So if you're thinking, where's deer management and the issues with deer, actually, that was not the objective of this horizon scan. We started out with a sort of a very eclectic and vast array of different issues that people brought to the table, and that was distilled down from 180 to just 15, which were then debated in more depth. And if there was a different horizon scan done with a different group of people in 2, 3 or 4 years' time, they might come up with a completely different list. But what we wanted to try and achieve through this was to encourage debate and discussion right across the forestry sector about thinking way into the future. We're in a long-term game rather than just thinking about what we need to do tomorrow based on historical knowledge of our forests and forest managements in the past. So if you go on to the next slide, please, that would be really good. So this is a diagrammatic representation of the 15 issues, so they won't mean a great deal to you, but if I can sort of just say, in generality, we're talking about 3 different sets of topics. The issues 1 to 5 were mostly dealing with issues arising from climate change. Issues 6 to 10, we're looking at actually changing lifestyles and changing attitudes to the environment. And what do you do with new technology? How can new technology be used to benefit us and make a difference for the way in which we manage our forests? And then lastly, along the bottom, we're looking at actually, well, what's forestry, what forest products will we want in 50 years' time? What sort of output will people and society be demanding from our forests? And right at the end, what's the global context in which we work? Because those of us who've been involved in forestry for any great length of time know that forestry is a global industry, and anything that we do actually will have minimal impact, but global trends and global changes will have a much greater impact, and we need to be alive to those as we think what might happen in the next 50 years. So if we go on to the next slide, please, Martin. So 15 issues in a list. One of the big challenges is, so, how do you prioritize? What do you think, what's most important? What's most significant? Quite interestingly, of the 40 participants in the exercise, 90% of them put number 1 as their critical issue that we need to get to grips with over the next 50 years. And this is this concept of catastrophic forest ecosystem collapse. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in future. It was quite interesting to see our head of forest policy. I was participating in a talk where he was talking about the horizon scan. He obviously identified issue 1 as being really key, but then picked out issues 12 and 13. So, you know, how do we really build forests for wood products that we might not yet know about? So what new wood product markets might be there to stimulate more active forest management, and how do we have that sort of interactive dialogue so that we ensure that the products from our woodland are going to be beneficial to the management of the woodland, but also they're going to deliver what society wants. And then just to be alive, issue 13 is, you know, from a commercial point of view, what we planted 20 years ago might not be what we need in 30 years' time. So there's been, you know, we will have seen already through history, big conifer afforestation following the First World War and the Second World War, and then this move back to broadleaves and what that delivers. But actually, we don't really know for certain what actually markets will want in the future. If we could move to the next slide, please. Martin? That's great. So, okay, what do we mean by catastrophic forest ecosystem collapse? We've already seen the impact of tree diseases. They've had a major impact on our forest management in recent years. Phytophthora ramorum and statute tree plant health felling licenses have lost us thousands of hectares of larch in an effort to contain the disease. We've also seen ash dieback, which has sort of had the secondary infection by honey fungus, which has dramatically impacted on our rural landscapes. And we mustn't forget some of the big storms. Storm Arwen is probably the most recent in our memory, and many estates will have lost 1-2 years worth of cut in a single night. So these things are things that we need to tackle. If we look at insect attacks, let's consider perhaps acute oak decline. It might not be so prevalent yet in the north of England, but here in the south of England, acute oak decline has becoming increasingly visible within our woods, where a bacterial infection has encouraged entry of the agrostis beetle. And once you see the exit holes of the agrostis beetle, you'd be fairly sure that your oak is going to decline very quickly after that. This is something that's exacerbated by warm weather. It's moving westwards, it's moving northwards. So we're going to have those climate impacts leading to more pests and diseases, more wind blow, which is as a result of the unpredictable nature of our weather moving forward. And we need to address that. And we need to address that today, not not tomorrow. We need to address it today. So we already know some of what needs to be done to mitigate these risks. We want to look at multi-structured woods with a diverse mix of species that will allow these woods to be more resilient. So a number of us from the Royal Forestry Society, we visited Slovenia just in the last few weeks. Slovenia has a 60% tree cover. It's one of those wooded countries in Europe, and sustainability of forests has been promoted there since the 1770s. Forests are managed by continuous cover. They are regenerated through natural regeneration, and an ecosystems approach has defined their management system. So they still get damaged by wind blow, and they still get damaged by beetle attacks and so on, but the damage is far less than had been the case if there was a dominance of a single species, single age plantation forestry system, as we see with much of our Sitka spruce forest today. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a slightly lesser known issue in connection with climate change. We know we're going to get wetter winters, and we're also already seeing quite severe hotter summers, so that in the middle of the day, there are real risks now in the heat of the summer that actually forest operatives will struggle to work in those conditions. So many people have got up really early in the morning to doing their spraying, but actually we'll have that as absolutely the norm, and people will not be doing a lot of forestry work in the middle of the day because it's too hot. So we'll need to develop a more flexible forest workforce with transferable skills, and we certainly need to be careful that we don't have the situation as one might see here, where we've got wet conditions in woodlands, so wet that they can't actually carry the load-bearing capacity of the harvesting machines that we're using. So much more flexibility in the way in which we deal with the management and our operations, and a much shorter working windows. So many will remember what happened as a result of the 87 blow, when there was timber storage set up in places like Thetford to ensure continuity of supplies to the forest industry. Well, that may become a norm in the future. Somehow we do also need to ensure that we continue to supply the timber that our industry wants, and they won't be able to shut down and start up again when and if supplies are available. We already know that if we want to keep our sector viable and we want to keep our industries thriving, we have to generate that continuity of supply despite those difficult and challenging conditions that we might face. If we go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to move on from climate change and look at some of the sort of the technological opportunities that are being generated in other sectors and that could be adopted by forestry and used more widely. And one of those is eDNA. And what we mean by eDNA, that is the matter released by organisms into the atmosphere. And it is possible then, using eDNA techniques, to capture entire ecological communities so that they can be identified from small samples of soil or water. This is a technique that could have real opportunities for us. I already know that Till Hill have been using eDNA analysis to promote the sale of properties to their investors, to demonstrate to those clients that there are significant environmental credentials within their woodlands, and by using eDNA they're able to show the biodiversity interest even in quite commercial plantations. We could also use eDNA, for instance, to measure the impacts of compaction during harvesting operations by taking analysis in soils that have been compacted and taking analysis in soils that haven't been touched at all, and looking at the differences. And that in itself can actually be informative to persuade people to be much more cautious about soil health and caring for their soils as part of an ecosystems approach to forest management in the future. And we can use eDNA to track diseases, and that can be a much more rapid way of being able to demonstrate how diseases are spreading through our forests. If we could then have the next slide, please. Thank you. So in addition to eDNA, there's been quite a lot of work done on laser scanning and LiDAR imagery. The example here I've used is some work that's been done by Ghent University and Oxford University, which has been able to use LiDAR techniques to capture the total above ground biomass carbon of trees within woods. This is generating results which are very different from the sort of results that we've been using and applying through the Woodland Carbon Code, and it's a very accurate measure of that carbon capture. If we were wanting to consider that, so the commercialization of these new technologies, that would give us a better understanding of our forests and the impacts of different decisions. This could be transformational in the way we could use remote sensing and drones for data capture. We can use eDNA for data analysis, and then we could apply complex algorithms and machine learning and AI to actually give some interpretation that allows us to apply what we've learned to the way in which we manage our forest. So new technologies are likely to enable more rapid responses to pest and disease outbreaks, to enable more reliable estimates of timber volumes, values and carbon capture from what will now be multi-age, multi-species forests in much more complex management scenarios. It may enable us to permit better matching of timber properties to timber markets, and it could also be used to permit tree breeding. So just wanted to, when we go to the next slide, just to sort of show how this work that's been done by Ghent University has been applied in a commercial basis by CSX Carbon. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Martin. So here it's quite a good example of what we might call smart forestry, and full credit to CSX Carbon, who are a Yorkshire business. They've used drone imagery and machine learning algorithms to estimate above ground carbon sequestration in very young, newly planted plantations. So you've got an image here which shows the diameter of young trees that have been recently planted in an afforestation scheme. You've got that at scale. that is linked to a small control plot where detailed analysis and survey has taken place, and the diameter of the crowns of these young trees is then related to by algorithm to the diameter of their stems. And by doing these shots, they're able to show an accumulation of carbon over time. And what's valuable with something like this is actually the way in which it's used to verify carbon sequestration to investors in a credible way and a believable manner, so that the volumes of carbon that are estimated to be accumulated here being far more than the Woodland Carbon Code, but actually people are prepared to pay for it because they can believe in the methodology that's being applied. I'm going to leave then our new technologies and move on to timber markets. So if we could go to the next slide. This is probably way beyond our current thinking. Something I saw in a report prepared by some New Zealand academics, but I quite like the concept of, this is what we might be aspiring to in the future. Can we develop transparent wood to replace glass, transparent nanopaper to replace plastic? Can we look at lightweight wood for wind turbines? We're already in a number of ways looking at beams and composite beams to replace concrete and steel joists. What about wood-based energy storage devices and wood-based wastewater treatment parts? So these are sort of emerging technologies, and they could actually change the whole way in which we look at what sort of thing we want from our forests in future. But more than anything, because it's reconstituted wood products, this is an opportunity to add considerable value to low value timber products. And if we need that, we need that more than anything else if we're going to bring our woods back into management, because there'll be quite a lot of low value product that comes out of the woodland before actually to be proud of the high value products that we will then have. So if I could then pass on to the next slide, please. Bringing it back to home, this is an example taken from the UK. This is Buckland Timber from the southwest, a small business which has been able to manufacture glulam joists to replace steel and concrete joists using UK timber. So it was set up initially by a local forester talking to his neighbouring farmer. Can we have a go at trying to do this? And then the farmer brought his brother in, and they brought a few other people. This is a business now employing 20 staff, 15 years on, and they 50% of what they use is homegrown. They are creating these beams and these joists out of larch, Douglas fir, and ash. So a great way to see low value product being in effect channeled into really high value output, and full credit to the farming community and foresters who take the initiative to do something in a different way. So lastly, our last slide, just to touch very briefly on, well, what's the global situation? Why should we be bothered or worried about how UK forestry innovates and develops in a global world? We mitigating climate change and safeguarding our remaining wildlife, they have rightly become global issues, and they're already influencing the values that UK places on its forests and their regulation. These pressures are expected to increase, and there have been such initiatives now which are coming through, such as the Global Biodiversity Framework. But at the same time, we must note that timber is a globally traded commodity, and the UK is the third largest importer of timber worldwide after China and the USA. UK timber markets will be influenced by changes in demand and supplies from elsewhere, but we won't be able to respond effectively unless we look beyond our borders. So I was interested to learn that timber use globally has doubled since 2008. I can't believe that will be sustainable. But of the 4 billion global timber removals from forests annually, 50% goes for biomass. In the UK, similarly, 50% from our forests focus on growing, goes to biomass or other low value products. So as we move forward, I think it will be really important that we include and consider the global dimension and the needs that will place on our resource. The issues we've got in the UK will be shared across the world. And if we're going to be effective and really innovate and make a difference, then we should definitely be looking beyond our borders to find people who are doing things in a new and different way and seeing what we can take from that to ensure that forests in the UK thrive and are able to respond to the issues that we're likely to see in the future. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Alison. That was really interesting. Thank you. We have got one question now, which I think we might as well take now because it's quite a specific question. Emma, do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, or shall I ask it for you?
Very happy to ask, Alison. I was just wondering if you could give us any advice on how a woodland owner would go about getting a eDNA survey done and what's the cost?
So I can't give you an exact answer. I don't think it's as cheap as we would hope it could become in the future, but I'm sure there are companies out there who would be interested to take that on board. And if we are going to do an eDNA survey, it would be better to do some research first and look at others who might be exploring the same thing. So it may even be that you, Emma, in your role in Natural England, might be able to encourage people to work together and collaboratively, because we need to find a way so that this methodology and these techniques can become more readily available for landowners so that they can learn effectively how to interpret results as well as do the surveys.
I have heard some really interesting stuff has been done by Forestry England on eDNA surveys of mycorrhizal fungi, and they've come. I haven't seen the results yet, but Andrew Stringer from Forestry England was very excited about it. So I'm looking forward to learning more about that. And I think Forest Research has been doing eDNA work on the stomach contents of what deer are eating to find out how much rare species they're eating. So it really is a hugely expanding area of work, as well as looking at protected species. Like you can do eDNA for greater crested newts, which is why I asked the question actually, because that's more mundane and something that we come across woodland owners needing to know. But I actually didn't have the answer to it myself, and I just thought it would be an easy way of getting the answer, but not this time.
Oh, well, let's not forget the topic, though. I think it's really important that we try and get this available to people so that we make better decisions in our woods.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, Alison, is this the technology that's allowing these sort of Phytophthora tests, which strip tests that you can do, or is that something else? I don't know. You know, like you can do a COVID test, home test. You can now do one for Phytophthora, can't you? You can buy them, and I don't know whether that's through eDNA or what, but I was interested to hear about that. So
yeah, that's news to me, but certainly, Martin, like it has some of those principles that are being applied.
Yeah. What you do is you sort of get some of the material which you think is infected or might be infected and mash it up, for want of a better word, and dilute it a little bit, shake it around, put some drops of that onto it is just like a COVID strip test thing. Put it on that and it'll tell you whether or not that there is a Phytophthora in it. It won't tell you much more than that, unfortunately. It won't tell you which of the sort of 200 plus Phytophoras there are, I think, in the British Isles, but yeah, it may well be that sort of technology, but that's something which landowners can do very easily themselves, and you see advertisements for that in the Quarterly Journal of Forestry and the Conform magazines and things like that. So yeah, never tried it myself, but it's interesting. So
yeah, it's good.
So yeah, good. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that, Alison. Well, if anybody else has got any questions for Alison regarding to the Forestry Horizon scan, please do put them in the chat and we can deal with them later on. I'm going to go on now to talking about the future-proofing advice service that Northwoods are sort of launching, and which this webinar is about. In that sense, we are now sort of making this available. It's something we've been talking about for a little while, but wanted to make it available to people. So I will just start sharing my screen again. Hopefully you can all see that all right now. So, okay, so the Northwoods future proofing advice service, as we're calling it. So, so this follows on very much from what Alison was talking about, and thinking about, what are the sort of challenges that might be presenting themselves to woodland owners in the longer term. So, not the sort of 5 to 10 year period which we commonly think of in the standard woodland management planning timeframe, but beyond that, the next 20, 30, 40 years, and the things which we want to start thinking about and getting ready for in one way or another. So this is a free service that we'll be providing to woodland owners as part of the Northwoods programme. We think it's of particular relevance to woodlands which have little or no intervention. Now, you might remember at the beginning I said that the Northwoods programme is funded by the Forestry Innovation Fund, Woodlands into Management Programme. So there is a particular reason for that from the point of view of the funding, but also I think it's fair to say that woodlands which don't have active management or much active management are more prone to threats and tend to have more weaknesses, and therefore aren't necessarily as resilient as woodlands which are managed in some way. And that might be due to lack of diversity of species or other such things, or plant health issues, these sorts of things. So particularly relevant to woodlands, to say, which do have little or no intervention. It is restricted to woodlands within the northeastern Yorkshire, I'm afraid to say, because that's where our funding is for. But it's something which I think we will be monitoring to see, what sort of demand there is for it, and how successful it is, and then putting that into our end of project report back to the Forestry Commission as if there's something that might be useful to woodland owners and agents further afield across England and the UK generally. No size limit. So there's no sort of minimum 2 hectare or maximum 10 hectare or anything like that. Any size woodland is eligible for this. As I said, the focus is probably on woodlands with little or no intervention. So we're expecting it to be smaller woodlands, but there is no size limit as such. So please come forward with anything. Consists of an on-site visit of up to half a day. That will depend on the size of the woodland, obviously, and the complexity of it. I don't think we'll quibble if it's a little bit more than that. And what we'll be looking at during that is an assessment of potential future threats and opportunities. So, as I said, longer term future threats and opportunities in the sort of 10 plus horizon. And we'll also be looking, if appropriate, in giving some guidance on undertaking a woodland condition assessment report. Now, the woodland condition assessment is something which some of you might be familiar with. It's something that was developed by members of the England Woodland Biodiversity Group some years ago, actually, and has been in existence. But recently, within the last few months, a new app has been developed to help people do this. And what the woodland condition assessment enables is owners or agents to look at their woodland and to assess its condition for use with the statutory biodiversity metric. So Alison mentioned about sort of new natural capital issues and things like that, biodiversity net gain, and this is an assessment which could be of particular use for that, and looking at the various range of issues relating to biodiversity in particular, which are of relevance. If you're interested in looking at that beforehand, you can go onto this website, woodlandcondition.silver.org.uk, to find out more information. Silver, one of the partners there who developed the app, to make it more usable. Even more information is available actually on the Field Studies Council website. The Field Studies Council, I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and they are one of the partners, and they provide training courses to do with the woodland condition assessment, and also some survey packs, and you can go onto their website to look at that. We may, as I say, provide guidance on that if it's appropriate to the woodlands we're looking at. It will depend largely on the objectives of the woodland owner. If it's very much around biodiversity, it's something that will probably be very appropriate. If there are more mixed objectives, aims and objectives, then it might be something that somebody needs to be aware of, but other than that, perhaps not quite as relevant for them. So that's something worth definitely having a look at anyway, even if you're not going forward with the actual future proofing visit as such. So just back to what the future proofing advice consists of. So we will then issue a report. We'll sort of wander around with a clipboard and a standard template, and issue a report following that. And then also provide any sort of follow-up online telephone advice that you might be after. So in terms of the actual report, what it will cover is issues like climate change impacts. And I should perhaps say is that we are basing this loosely on the Forestry Horizon scan, which Alison just talked about, and putting those various issues into a smaller number of groupings of things that we might want to talk to woodland owners about. So climate change impacts, forest health, by that I mean including things like plant health, biodiversity. Alison talked about forest ecosystem collapse being of extreme importance. So all of those things which might contribute to that in one way or another. Urban and infrastructure development. In the last few weeks, we've heard about the push to achieve our housing targets. That's likely to have a big impact on many woodlands, in particular those in urban and peri-urban environments. So what might be happening in that in terms of the next 10 or 20 years, and how might that actually impact on woodlands? For example, does it mean that there are going to be more people, having greater access? Will that have an impact on the woodland condition? Will it have an effect on plant health? These sorts of things, introduction of pests and diseases, what can be done to get woodlands ready for greater access if that might be an issue? Future markets, Alison discussed. A lot of woodland owners at the moment are able to sell their timber, and some markets such as firewood do attract a premium at the present moment, but it could be that within the next 10 or 20 years those sorts of markets aren't as attractive, or perhaps aren't even accessible to some people. I'm sure many of you will be aware of talk at the present moment about air emissions from wood stoves, from firewood stoves, and what that might mean in terms of wood use in those sorts of facilities. So looking at other things that we might need to access in terms of markets, as others become less accessible. And then new technology in terms of both things like machinery. The types of harvesting machinery are changing. Areas which are not harvestable or not harvestable economically at the present moment might be in 10 years because of differences in machinery. Could be new tools and apps which are available on smartphones to help people manage woodlands. Alison's talked about a number of technologies there to do with eDNA and such things. So again, that's something we'll be looking at. But then what we will actually sort of produce in the future proofing report is an analysis of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. I'm sure anybody who's been on a course at any point will be familiar with SWOT analysis, but it's a good way of sort of brigading those various issues that we'll be looking at and thinking about them in a practical sense. We'll be producing some prioritised recommendations for future proofing your woodland. So what the things are that we think you ought to be thinking about, and the priority of those things you ought to be thinking about for the next perhaps 10, 15 years, and then longer term future than that. And then sources of further information advice, which you might want to go to in order to get more information that would help you in the long-term management of your woodland. So I'm going to finish in a minute and just go back and see if there's any more questions at all. Just before I do that, though, I just wanted to mention a couple of other Northwoods events which are coming up. There's one on the 12th of September regarding local markets and diversification at Shiloh Wood in Northumberland, and another one on the 19th of September, tree and timber measurement, which will include the My Forest inventory tool. That one's actually being run by RDI Associates, one of the Northwoods partners. Northwoods events, generally speaking, are available to book on the Eventbrite platform, as this one was. So do go to that, or in the case of the tree and timber measurement tool, if you go onto the Northwoods website, you will see there's a link there to the RDI Associates booking page on that one. So if you are interested in either of those, then do please have a look at them. And there will be other events announced, over the next few months as well, over the autumn and winter programme. And then finally, after the event this evening, you will be getting a link to an event evaluation. So if you can, do please fill that in, because that really does help us to make sure that we provide things which are of value in the future. So, right, so I'm going to stop sharing now. So, okay, so has anybody got any other questions at all? If you want to either put it in the chat or raise your hand. I see, actually, thank you, Martha, you've just put a link to the evaluation form in the chat, so people can always click on that if you want and be filling that in as we're talking. Does anybody else have any questions at all? Can I perhaps just ask is there anybody out there who thinks that the sort of future-proofing advice will be beneficial to woodland owners at all? Is it something that might be of interest to people? We're being very well behaved and very quiet this evening. I think everybody wants to get off. So, Emma.
I'm sure that the future proofing will be useful. I just wanted to come in on the woodland condition toolkit, which I also had some minor part in the development of. And I just wanted to sort of highlight to people that it's worth keeping an eye on, because it is quite likely that it may be linked to measuring progress in when you've had a woodland grant from the Commission, that they might want to do a baseline survey of a woodland condition and see how it changes over the 10-year course of the grant scheme. So it is something that might be used in development in the future, as a way of measuring how successful grants have been. And that means that, it might be really important to keep an eye on.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is not something I know a lot about, but I think it has in the past been used as part of the pilot for the sustainable farming incentive, isn't it? I believe. Now, whether or not that'll be rolled out into the wider programme, I don't know. So, if there's any farmers and land agents out there, it may be, again, something which is worth keeping an eye on. So
I don't think that assessment's been used in anger before, so I think this will be a fresh thing. But yeah, the survey has certainly been available. It's been on the Woodland Wildlife Toolkit webpage.
Yes.
But yeah, it was only as a downloadable paper form, and we don't really think that a lot of people really accessed it. And it hoped that it's going to be much more accessible now. It's on an app that you could take out on your phone.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's not a perfect tool, but it'll give a good sort of baseline that is comparable, between different woods and stuff. So it's hopefully that it's going to be useful to measure change.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Emma. Yeah. So okay. All right. Well, I think we're sort of probably about to wrap up. Well, thank you we've had a couple of other comments in the chat just about people finding it useful and would love to see the project spread to other parts of the country. That's very encouraging. Thank you very much. So you're probably all wondering how you would actually access the service, future proofing service. What we'll be doing is we will be sending an email to everybody who sort of participates in the Northwoods programme after this webinar, introducing it to people and allowing you to sign up there, or if you sort of want to get involved beforehand, if you would just like to drop an email to the Northwoods email address, you can go onto the website and fill in the form there and send it off and just say you'd be interested in speaking to that, and one of us will be in contact to talk to you about it. We'll hopefully be providing it sort of over the coming months as such. We are limited by funding to doing it up to the end of March of next year, so it is only available for a relatively short period of time, and we would like to sort of get a few, as many as possible done before that, just to show what the demand for the service is and the usefulness of it. So it's something we might be looking to continue in the longer term. So with that, I will say good evening to everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. If anybody wants to rewatch it, if you should want to, then we will have this up on YouTube fairly soon. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your evenings, and thank you very much for attending. Thank you. Bye-bye.